Hi, welcome to the Arable Leader podcast. And today we're going to have another dive into the 5 capitals, and we're going to talk about finance and how finance plays in investment and entrustment. And today I'm joined by Lydia, who is my colleague and also my daughter. And we're speaking to you from a house in Scotland that we are vacating, have just vacated. That's why there's lots of echoes and hardly any furniture, because my wife and I are moving to the United States of America, to Nashville, Tennessee. Y'all, coming your way. Lydia, take it away. This is the Arable Leader podcast. I'm Karl Martin, and we're exploring true, brave, kind, curious leadership, leading from your soul.
So good to be here with you all. And yeah, as Dad Karl mentioned, we are currently sitting in a very empty house. It's quite a big deal and big moment for us as a family. But we wanted to do one last broadcast from this space as kind of a launching off point. And also it's at the beginning of the new year, a great time to reflect on our capitals, on what we want to really invest in our year ahead and in our leadership. And so we're talking today about our financial capital. And we have some questions. This is a Q&R episode from you guys. Thank you so much for sending in questions. Thank you so much for being so engaged in this series. And we will answer, well, Karl will. I will shoot questions at Karl.
And I will try. I'll try.
So I think perhaps to start, you do such a great introduction to the 5 capitals. So I think just to refresh us, would you be able to just talk through the 5 capitals
Sure.
and the order that they come in?
Sure. So very quickly, every human being has entrustments that they are given. Finance, intellect, health, relationships, and spiritual capital. And I think they are given in that order, with spiritual capital being the highest of all capitals and financial capital being the lowest of all capitals. And the idea is that we're supposed to invest in every single one of our capitals, but we're supposed to invest upwards.
That's perfect.
Succinct enough.
So quite a recurring question is if you could expand on why financial capital is the least in that list.
Well, I mean, I'm going to stick with the idea that financial capital is the least. And I emphasize it strongly because I think for most of us and for most of our world, it becomes the most important capital. And when it becomes the most important capital, it overcomes and overshrouds every other capital. It becomes the most important thing in our lives, and it can take over. I think the reason I want to say it's the lowest form of capital is because it is to be used to benefit every other capital, firstly. Secondly, I think, because there is something about the nature of money that, if put in the wrong space and in the wrong order, becomes deeply invidious and can become quite corrupted and corrupting. For example, whenever money enters a relationship and a friendship, you know the amount of times that you say to yourself, or we say to one another, well, it was great until it became about money. The moment that I build a relationship with someone and then it becomes financial becomes another interesting moment. And because I believe, Lydia, that relationship is everything and leadership is deeply relational, there's something that happens with money that, if we're not careful, begins to undermine relationships. It's very easy for people to use people to get money rather than to use money to help people. And it's very easy for money to become a zero-sum game. You know, if I get, then you lose. If you win, then I lose. When I think ultimately we're supposed to use all these entrustments to benefit so many other people. So that's why I want to put it at the bottom. And I want to say, if you can get money right at the beginning of 2025, in your head and in your wallet and in your bank account. If you can get money right, it gives you a chance to get every other form of capital right and to invest really well.
Yeah, I love that. I think perhaps looking at it, even though you say finance is the lowest form of capital, I think the way I've heard you speak about it and really enjoy thinking about it is when you do the five. So it's five capitals, but they all kind of layer on top of each other. So you need financial capital in order to invest in the other capitals. So it's not that you're saying money is bad or corrupting or, it's very much an intentional, very important part of the five because it forms a foundation.
Yeah, and the very reason to put it at the bottom and to be provocative around that is to say you have to investigate very hard your attitude towards money if you're going to be successful in every other one of these capitals. If money becomes everything, and it so often does, it begins to control you and control all your decisions, and it debilitates you in the other forms of capital, which actually might be more important. So for example, and I've used this before, almost no one on their deathbed says, I wish I'd worked harder and made a lot more money. Almost everyone on their deathbed says something like, I wish I had worked less and spent more time with the friendships that I have. I wish I'd invested in my health a bit more. I wish I'd invested in whatever I think eternity or beyond looks like a little bit more. We're not holding on to the money and the things and the stuff. In fact, sitting here in a space where we've got rid of 3/4 of the things that we own, I can't tell you how cathartic and great it is to be less burdened by stuff. I'll stop preaching now.
Well, a few questions came through about why the pursuit of money, why the pursuit of stuff is the most corrupting to the soul more than any other capital or thing that you're kind of working towards.
And I don't know the answer to that. I think, one day maybe we'll all find out the answer to that question. But I do think there's something that attaches itself to the pursuit of money that not only becomes invidious, but becomes dangerous to relationships. If I begin to own things like this, it's so easy for those things to own me. I think of Gollum, Smeagol in Lord of the Rings, my precious, and holding on to the thing that was never really his in the first place. And so there is something, it's almost like a spirit that attaches itself to money and the pursuit of money. You never have enough. It's fascinating to me that when I was younger, and I think this is probably true for everyone online, when I was younger, I used to think if I could just earn £30,000 a year, I'll be okay, I'll survive, I'll be good. And then I did, and it was amazing for about a week and a half. And then I saw someone who was earning 40, 50, 100, and so it goes on. If I just have one car, two cars. If I have a really nice tailored suit, well, what about three? Because then I can mix and match them. If I can get a great pair of shoes, if I can, and now you're getting an insight into all the things that I love. If I can have one watch that works and looks great, what if I have a collection of watches? And before you know it, what happens is you end up a slave to the things, a slave to the money that could free you up, that could enable you to live life in all its fullness, but it becomes something that controls you and holds on to you. So I think there's something, and I don't exactly know what it is, but I think there's something in money that unless you get it right, unless you get your head around it, it will control your actions, your thoughts, and your behaviors.
Yeah, I've heard you speak on stewardship quite a lot when it comes to this topic, and I think that's a really helpful comparison when we talk about ownership and the difference between ownership and stewardship. So I wondered if you could expand our thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ways to approach the money conversation is to force yourself to have a bigger picture, a bigger world view. It's not just yourself, and You, yourself, and I. You know what I'm saying? It's not just you in the equation. It's other people. It's the people that you invest in. It's the people that you have around your life. It's the people that might be benefited by your financial world. And it's not just now. It's longer than now. It's what you gained when you entered the world and what you leave behind when you leave the world. And it seems to me that we don't have a problem with the concept of managing rather than owning, or stewarding rather than owning, when it comes to things like the planet, creation. You know, we don't own land. We don't own mountains. We don't own rivers. We steward them, and we steward them for us and for the next generation and for the world and for nature. What if we were to employ that around everything that we have? Our business is not our business. We steward it for the people that get benefited by it and for the people that come after us. Our family is not even our family. We steward it for the next generation. Our traditions are not our traditions. And as soon as you do that, life becomes so much more generous, because you live with open hands and open lives, and it stops being a zero-sum game. You know, if I win, you have to lose. No, we can all find a way to win in this if we recognize. And you know, this is not new concepts. Many of the most wealthy people on the planet live in this kind of way, not just because it's a great tax break, right? But because they recognize they have a responsibility with the money that they have. I think of Warren Buffett. I think of Bill Gates. There's so many people that we could talk about who say, I don't need to live off this. I could give this. I'm here to bless others and bless beyond and bless the planet and bless, you know, whatever it is. So I think the way to posture yourself towards money is to have a longer term, bigger picture view, and recognize that money is just a gift, like every other gift that you have. I have a gift to speak. I'm supposed to steward it on behalf of others. I have a gift of money. I'm supposed to use that on behalf of others. I have a gift of intellect. I'm supposed to use that so that other people might benefit from the wisdom that I have. If I hold it to myself, eventually it becomes stagnant, it becomes stale, and it goes off and becomes toxic.
I think because we talk about healthy leadership and that coming from a healthy soul.
Yeah.
You know, one of our principles is kind, true, brave, kind, and curious. And I think the kindness part of that is very linked with generosity of time and generosity of resources. And it makes you a healthier, better leader in the whole. So I love that idea of generosity actually being a blessing. Actually being the way you posture yourself towards using your resources for your leadership gains, if that makes sense. Your leadership health.
Makes total sense.
We have a lot of listeners from the US, all over the world actually, but obviously we're currently in the UK. You're moving to the US. We do a lot of work in the US, and there is a stark cultural difference in how the UK culturally views money and financial capital in comparison to the US. We would probably talk about that in terms of the UK having a bit more of a poverty spirit. Now, this is generalizing here. I'm not pointing fingers at any particular people. We all have, you know, we're all on a
yeah, we're just pointing fingers.
We're all on a spectrum, but there is a very, you know, we've been clearing out our house, and we've had just there's just been so much stuff that we've got, and different comments from, anyway, that's irrelevant, but basically you can feel the poverty spirit shift in when you come over to the UK. Yes. And then you go over to the US, and it actually feels completely on the other level of prosperity, where everyone is meant to gain more. And if you don't have the next car or the next kind of, I don't know, technology, clearly I'm really up with with the trends. But yeah, it's a lot more what you have, you show. And it's actually, that's quite honored. And so I wondered around the conversation around financial capital when you're coaching in the UK, when you're coaching in the US, what are those conversations like? How do you talk about money?
Before we get into exactly the talk about money, we have to understand where these things come from, and we have to kind of, the things that you're aware of, you have choices around. The things you're unaware of control you. I once heard someone talk about where the pervading spirit of a culture comes from, and talked about Europe and America in very diverse and different ways. I mean, we often think that they are the same culture or very similar culture. They're actually mirror cultures. They're almost opposite cultures in so many ways. We could investigate that in a further podcast. But he talked about the fact that that the culture comes from the breakdown of feudalism, which was the governmental structure for over 1,000 years in Europe, where a feudal lord owned some peasants. The peasants paid tithes and taxes to the feudal lord. The feudal lord was supposed to protect the peasants and look after them. And that was a system that survived, sometimes well and sometimes very, very unwell for people for 1,000 years. And then it broke down because of the rise of cities. No one knew who owned a peasant anymore. And because of wars where the peasant populations were completely decimated. And so when that broke down and was replaced by our forms of government, particularly quite a socialist kind of forms of government, there was an implicit covenant that was done in Europe, and particularly in the United Kingdom. And it was, no one will be a lord anymore. We don't like lords. They abuse us. People get killed. They don't look after us in the way they should look after us. We will all be peasants. Now, driven, of course, by some of the Marxist philosophies of our continent. And so when, Lydia, you grew up, and when I certainly grew up in the UK, we were taught explicitly and implicitly, don't get ahead of yourself, don't get beyond yourself, stay in your lane, don't try and lead too strongly, don't have too radical ideas, don't be too entrepreneurial, don't put yourself out there. We have the tall poppy syndrome when it comes to leadership. And as far as our philosophy or our theology even, we have a theology and philosophy of lack, of poverty, of we're all pretty miserable, we're all down in the gutter, which makes it quite difficult for us to be highly entrepreneurial and highly risk-taking. Now, of course, this is generalized. Now, of course, in the United States of America, exactly the same thing happened when we got rid of feudalism, no taxation without representation, and you kicked us out, but you made a different implicit covenant. Your covenant was, no one will be a peasant anymore, we will all be kings. And that resulted in a prosperity thinking or a prosperity spirit of entitlement, celebrity, and consumerism. And when you're bringing up your kids, you say things like, you can become whatever you want to become. You can run with whatever dream you have. You can be whoever you want to be. It's the American dream. Now, the poverty spirit is nonsense. It keeps people down. It means we don't take risks. It means we don't speculate. It means we don't invest properly. We don't have a go at things. The prosperity spirit is equal nonsense. You cannot be whoever you want to be. You can't do whatever you want to do, and you find yourself speculating with stuff you don't have, and you create a culture of debt, and you create a culture where people are always striving, and ultimately they are frustrated. So those are the two kind of cultures. So when I'm coaching someone in the UK, I'm trying to say, take more risks. You can be more than you think you can be. Come on, step up. Go step into leadership. Dream the dream. Failure is not a person, it's an event, and failure is part of the stepping stones to life and to success. And when I'm teaching someone in the US, very often I'm saying, you're not all that. Actually, you are limited, and limits are good things. And you should be careful when you're taking risks. So you see what I'm doing with the financial thing. That's interesting.
I think what I love about this conversation is that you start to flip the narrative on money being either just a means to an end, a how I get to being this important, successful, shiny person. It's not a metric of success, basically. But on the other hand, it's not something to be feared or seen as something that's going to ultimately corrupt you or or be something that makes you kind of a fake, shallow person. I think money here, what we're talking about is money is opportunity. Money is actually, like as you say, something that we can use to invest into other people, into our leadership development, into our own. We talk about you being the project, and ultimately, when people pay for coaching, they're investing in themselves being the project. When people pay for counseling, when people pay to go to the gym, when people pay to go to university, and money is used there as an opportunity to be the healthy version of yourself. You're using money for how it's meant to be used, for opportunities for yourself, and then opportunities for other people.
I think it's fascinating to me. Money's not neutral, but it's not good or bad. It's something that we have that we're supposed to use well for the benefit of not just ourselves but other people. I think the Judeo-Christian worldview is really healthy here, and I'm fascinated by, if you allow me, the teachings of Jesus, where he holds on to two things that sound in complete contrast to one another, but actually come together really well. There are two parables that he teaches. One is known as the parable of talents, where a master goes away and gives to three servants different forms of money: 5 talents, 3 talents, 1 talent. And they're supposed to invest those talents, and then he comes back, and the person with 5 has made another 5 and get 10, and he's applauded. The one with, I think it's 2 or 2 actually, invested his 2 and comes back with 4, applauded. And the one with 1 buries the talent in the ground, and there's no investment. It digs up the talent and comes back with the 1 talent. And it's interesting that he is the one who is castigated. The one who doesn't invest, the one who doesn't use the money to gain more, the one who doesn't speculate. So that's an interesting thing. Money is useful and it's supposed to be used. You're supposed to speculate with it. It's not bad, it's good. You're supposed to run. And then the other story that's told is interesting, because this is the story that we tend to run to whenever we think of the Christian faith, is the story of the man, the foolish man with the bigger and bigger barns. He gets a big crop, he builds a barn. He gets a bigger crop, he builds a bigger barn. He gets a bigger crop, he builds a bigger barn. And then Jesus says to him, how foolish, because tonight his life is demanded of him. And what he's trying to say, I think, is the acquisition of wealth for the sake of the acquisition of wealth, the more for the sake of the more, is actually a foolish way to live. You're supposed to get more so you can bless others. You're supposed to get more so you can live in a generous way. You're supposed to get more so you can improve in your health and in your family. You're supposed to get more so you might encourage and enable the community to flourish, and you might leave a legacy. And I think holding those two, whether you believe in the Bible stuff or not, but holding those two concepts in tension is really healthy. You have to speculate, and it's not all about you, and it's not all for you.
That's good. So, what would you spend your money on? If money is opportunity, well, it is opportunity. We've defined it, and say we got given a check of multiple millions for Arable.
No, I'm going to go billions.
What would you spend the money on?
Yes. Well, for me, and this might sound weird, but for me the thing is, it's not about money. Arable's not about money. I mean, we will make money, we will charge money. Don't think you're going to get free coaching, but you might actually. But it's about the impact and the influence. If we have a good thing, we want to share a good thing, and that takes money. And so two things that come up top of my head that I would spend money on. One is we're already launching a foundation, a 501c3 in the States, because I want to take what I've written about true, brave, kind, and curious leadership, or Cave Road Table Fire in the book. I want to take it and put it into the curriculum of every school in the United Kingdom and every school in the US, because I think that 12-year-olds should learn leadership. And I know that that's going to cost a lot of money. So if I had a lot of money and I could encourage my friends who have a lot of money, that's what I want to do. I want every 12-year-old to know how to lead themselves and to lead somebody else, because I think the world becomes a much better place. I think one of the problems that we've got in leadership is we don't know who we are, and we don't know how to lead, and we don't know how to have a bigger view, and we don't know how to bless other people. And so that's what I want to do. That's one thing. And the second thing, I would love to replicate this house somewhere else, because this house has become a retreat space. And having the opportunity to have a space where people come to that is a safe space to have dangerous conversations with themselves. That's what I would do with my money. I would also buy a Land Rover Defender vintage edition and get it really tricked out with great leather seats like we've had back here, and probably some nice tailored
seats. And take all your daughters on an incredible holiday. Maybe in the Maldives.
I have no idea
that sounds
what you're
great.
talking about.
I like the hard launch of the foundation as well. That was a hard launch, everyone. You just had an exclusive preview into the next few years for Arable.
There's books, there's courses, there's stuff coming.
That's great. And one last question that I've had come through is about the most common conversation you have with those you coach, with the executives you coach. What's the most common money conversation you have?
Well, there are two. One is because I coach some very successful businessmen and women, and there's obviously, what do I do with what I have? How much is too much? What do I live off? How do I use my money? How do I not waste it? And so we often have that conversation. To be honest, I'm not particularly qualified to have any of the in-depth conversations around that. I can help them with philosophy, ideas, concepts, and big picture conversations. When it comes to the actual practical stuff, you have to go and talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. And then I think the other conversation I have is a conversation of how I think most of America particularly functions on the idea that an organization, a business, only exists to make profit. And I get it. You haven't got a business if you're not making profit over a long period of time. But the conversation I have a lot is that what if a business is real? The main idea of business is value, not profit. How did we bring value? And if we bring value to a community, if we bring value to our customers, if we bring value to our nation or to a particular industry, then profit will follow. So that's the conversation I try to have. Dial down the concept of it's all about the pounds and the pence, or the dollars and the whatever the equivalent is. It's actually about value.
Mm-hmm. I have quite a lot of conversations around legacy and what does legacy really mean. I guess it's kind of the same conversation around is my life successful? What metrics can I use? I believe that money is part of that. I think you can bless so many people by leaving behind financial legacy. But as you said, most people, and I have been next to people who have been on their deathbeds and held their hands, and that is not the conversation or the focus. Money, what you leave behind materially, isn't really at top of mind in those moments.
The question, and sometimes leaving too much behind materially is really unhelpful to people. I think the question that you need to engage with is, what did I do with what I have? And money is part of that equation, but it's not the whole thing. What did I do with what I have? That's legacy. How do I leave what I have in a good way to other people? And doing it throughout your life, not just at the end of your life. Is that too grim a way to end this podcast?
No, I think it's deep and thoughtful and lets people mull over what they're living for and how they're living.
Well, my friends, thank you so much for listening to the Arable Leader podcast. I hope that we provoke some conversations. I'm sure we haven't answered anywhere near the amount of questions that you would have. Please feel free to get back to us around these things so that we could continue the conversation. But as you launch out in 2025, make good decisions. think through your capitals, think through your priorities, and use your money to bless every other form of capital. See you soon.
You've been watching The Arable Leader with Karl Martin. Subscribe for more episodes with great leaders. And you can also listen to The Arable Leader wherever you get your podcasts. For more resources for leading in a healthy way, visit arableco.com and check out Karl's new book, The Cave, the Road, the Table, and the Fire.